Shadow Hack. Chapter 681, Encountering a Beast Clan. Misson snorted. I naturally have my ways. Okay, I don't want to talk any more nonsense with you. In any case, once you take the front, our underworld serpent will be safe. If you encounter some emergency, don't hope that our underworld serpent will care about you. Li Yunmu nodded at her. Same to you. In any case, Misson wasn't any good news in Li Yunmu's eyes. He naturally didn't hope that her underworld serpent would do anything to help him. As long as they didn't cause trouble for him, he would already thank his stars. Li Yunmu then began to proceed towards the ancient lands once more while inquiring the system about the directions. Halfway there though, the path was broken. They reached a steep cliff, and there was no more road forward. Despair appeared on Miss Anne's face. The legend is really true then, that it is impossible to reach the eastern domain. How could the path break at midway point? Li Yunmu, are you trying to deliberately make a fool out of me? To intentionally become the enemy of our underworld serpent? Li Yunmu rolled his eyes. I'm not idle enough to play games with you. I am busy with my own affairs. I'm not very familiar with the eastern domain, so I'm just following the map. The path is broken here though, and there is nothing more recorded in the map. Misson pouted. Hateful. Don't tell me there truly isn't a place in such a large origin world for my underworld serpent to survive. Li Yunmu nodded at her. You have become the target of many powers. If you hadn't invited the Eight, would the Scandinavian God Council and Heavenly Gods Council had joined hands to fight against them? Just based on this point, you can no longer exist in the territory of Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavian God Council. Not to mention that after the Eight suffered a crushing defeat, you people poured a torrent of insults on them and completely offended them. The only place where the underworld serpent can go is the two poles of morning and evening. However, the power structure there is even more complicated than among the other powers. They have already divided into two factions, which makes that place even less suited for underworld serpent. His words hit the mark in Miss Anne's heart, making her feel somewhat ashamed. She could not deny the facts, however. But what confused Misson was that it hadn't been long since Li Yunmu had entered the origin world. How did he understand its situation so clearly? Could it be because of that being inside his body? When she thought of it, Misson couldn't help but narrow her eyes. As long as they could obtain the being inside Li Yunmu's body, how could they still be unable to find a path into the eastern domain? She didn't believe that. Just as Li Yunmu had analyzed, Misson understood that she could only proceed towards the eastern domain to temporarily evade the hunt of the western powers. At that moment, a voice echoed in Li Yunmu's body. It constantly reverberated in his ears. Jump down. Jump down and you will see the eastern domain. In the past, the path between the west and east had been cut off, causing the exchange between the two sides to become infrequent. Gradually, the situation reached its present state where all the paths were broken and they could only gaze at each other from afar. The system constantly ordered Li Yunmu to jump down to reach the eastern domain, but he didn't know whether he should believe it or not. Doesn't matter. First, I need to reach the eastern domain. Then, I can ask for the true facts from the system. After Li Yunmu thought that, he jumped off the cliff. His action scared Misson and the others, who were so astonished that they couldn't say a word. Misson, what should we do? This youngster is crazy. He is too eager to die. Misson didn't think that Li Yunmu did it because he didn't want to live. It was definitely because of the instructions the being inside his body had given him. With that being the case, the members of Underworld Serpent had to follow him. It was their only way to survive. Follow after him and jump. When Misson said that, she closed her eyes and jumped. The other members of Underworld Serpent looked at each other in dismay. Their leader shouldn't have lost her brain like that guy who jumped off just a moment ago. However, when they saw Misson jump down, how would the people of Underworld Serpent not follow? So all of them also jumped after her. Missen released a muffled shriek, then her body suddenly landed on something soft. Finally. When Missen opened her eyes, she saw mountains in all directions. Their peaks stretched far and wide, and all of them were covered in verdant plant life. It was extremely beautiful. Was it the eastern domain? It seemed much more beautiful than the western region. This is so beautiful. Can you move your buttocks from me before enjoying the scenery? Li Yunmu's words gave Missen a fright, and she rushed to her feet while snorting at him. Why did you jump without saying anything to us, underworld serpent? You might have died, you know. Your underworld serpent doesn't care about my death, does it? I wanted to jump, so I jumped. And have created no obstruction for you all. You. Missen pointed at Li Yunmu in anger and puffed up her cheeks. Li Yunmu stood up and looked all himself before asking inside himself, so are we in the Eastern Domain's ancient lands already? This is Eastern Domain, but we still haven't reached the ancient lands. So we have only arrived at the Eastern Domain? How far are we from the ancient lands? Li Yunmu asked in astonishment. Don't worry about the distance. First resolve the matter in front of you, then we'll talk. What matter in front of me? It's only underworld serpents people, but wait. Li Yunmu was originally relaxed, but once he turned around, he discovered that he was being attacked by a group of beasts. They looked extremely sinister and had an enormous horn on their heads. They also seemed to have been lying in wait for a long time. Probably because Li Yunmu and others had suddenly descended, the giant beasts had been startled. Soon though, they organized themselves and came over to examine them. How could so many monsters appear here? Miss Anne's complexion changed greatly. It was just as the rumors which circulated in the western region had said. The eastern domain was legendary for its beast clans. They were very intelligent and would sometimes contend for hegemony over some regions after turning into devil beasts. The mysterious beast clans were monsters dreaded by the western gods. But Missen hadn't expected that just as they arrived in the eastern domain, they would encounter one of them. How could I be so unlucky? Don't tell me that the ultimate fate of our underworld serpent is to be devoured by these monsters? I am truly unwilling. When Li Yunmu saw Miss Anne's indignation, his expression turned grave. It'd be better to think of some strategy now. How can we escape from these monsters? Chapter 682, Ordinary Beasts. Missen began to panic after seeing the numerous beasts. In contrast, Li Yunmu didn't appear tensed. It seemed like he had anticipated that a group of beasts would be waiting under the steep cliff. Missen, what should we do now? These Eastern Domain's beasts clans are life forms humans can't fight. Missen was naturally nervous, but she was the leader of Underworld Serpent, so regardless of whatever situation they encountered, she couldn't reveal her emotions. Otherwise, it would show that she was useless as a leader. Her gaze fell on Li Yunmu. She entrusted all her hope to him. He was the one who had proposed that they should enter the Eastern Domain. Once they encountered crisis, he wouldn't just abandon their underworld serpent, right? The system in Li Yunmu's body had already scanned the beasts in front of them. These are only ordinary beasts, not worthy of being feared. If we had encountered devil beasts or higher-level monsters, then it would truly be dreadful. They are only lowest-level beasts. Lowest? Li Yunmu breathed a sigh of relief. Only after obtaining the system's confirmation did he dare to attack. If an accident actually happened, then let alone speaking of proceeding towards the ancient lands, he might not even be able to return. When Li Yunmu saw Missen watching him with hopeful eyes, he decided to tease this girl so that in the future, she obeyed and listened to his every word instead of creating some trouble for him. Some of these beasts are giant beasts from ancient times. We need to run first. Given the strength of your people, we cannot be their opponents. When faced with the Colossus monster, Missen didn't doubt his words and promptly issued orders. Everyone quickly retreat, these are giant beasts from ancient times. Li Yunmu laughed inwardly. While watching the proceedings, he noticed to his surprise that the beasts were intelligent. After seeing Miss Anne's and the others deered and the way they retreated hurriedly, the beasts revealed their sharp fangs and rushed after them. In the beast's eyes, as soon as the opponent began to flee, it clearly proved that they were weaker beings, and as the stronger ones, the beasts naturally wouldn't let them go. The beasts rushed after Miss Anne and the others, the earth even trembled under their feet. The beasts were unwilling to let the woman off, viewing her as their prey. In the meantime, Li Yunmu stayed calm while laughing inwardly for making a fool of Miss Anne. When she saw that Li Yunmu wasn't the least bit anxious while she was panting for breath, she instantly realized that something was wrong. If they were being hunted, why did that guy seem like he was rejoicing about something? "Are you playing with me?" Miss Anne immediately asked. She stopped running, and her gaze turned ruthless. Li Yunmu saw that he had been discovered, and he smiled at her. "Forget it, I was just joking with you. Actually, these are just ordinary beasts. Don't tell me that your underworld serpent cannot even defeat such beasts. Scoundrel!" Miss Anne cursed in a rage. After hearing Li Yunmu's words, the people of Underworld Serpent entered battle mode to deal with the beasts. Given their sage flux level strength, they weren't afraid of them. As expected, they swept across the beasts with complete ease. Once they finished and recalled the scene from just a moment ago, when they were running away, they felt quite ridiculous. Because of the widespread rumors regarding the Eastern Domain, the people from the Western region were frightened easily. Li Yunmu took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Admittedly, this Eastern region is mysterious, but you can't be afraid of everything here. Otherwise, wouldn't it be just funny?" Li Yunmu's words caused Miss Anne's face to flush red. She understood very little about the Eastern Domain, but she presented herself like a weak chicken. "You still haven't seen the true foundation of our underworld serpent. Your present evaluation of us is unfair," she said coldly. Li Yunmu couldn't help but smile and shake his head. "You have an opportunity in front of you, so you should properly cherish it." The doorway to the Eastern Domain was surprisingly a vast ocean. If they wanted to reach the ancient lands, they had to first traverse a vast ocean, and no one knew what sort of monsters lived in it. Underworld Serpent's people were cautious, and they instantly halted. How could it be good? What sort of life forms existed there? Facing the unknown, their hearts were filled with dread. In the Western world, they weren't afraid even of gods. But in the Eastern Domain, regardless of whether it was ordinary beasts or the vast ocean, they were all extremely dreadful. A hint of cowardice appeared on Miss Anne's face. Earlier, their luck had been good, so they had only encountered ordinary beasts. But if they entered the vast ocean and encountered a devil beast or even a divine beast, how would she protect her people? Li Yunmu saw Miss Anne biting her lip in hesitation. She didn't seem ready to take the risk. He smiled slightly. "Since Miss Anne doesn't dare, we will part ways here. I want to check out the Eastern Domain." Upon seeing Li Yunmu walking toward the rotating spatial door in front of the vast ocean, Miss Anne pulled him back all of a sudden. "You are courting death, you know? No one knows exactly what lives there. If you advance rashly, aren't you afraid of dying early?" Li Yunmu smiled indifferently. "If you don't go, then don't tell me that you intend to spend your lifetime in the safety of this mountainous region? I don't know whether vicious beasts or giant beasts or devil beasts exist in the vicinity. If our luck is good, then we will only encounter beasts, but what if we encounter high-level beast clans? You would have led your underworld serpent to its death then." Li Yunmu's words scared Miss Anne. She gritted her teeth and hardened her heart before saying furiously, I will follow you and take the risk. But I am afraid that when in danger, you might abandon us. You must remember that I am going with you because I am afraid that you might encounter danger, so you also shouldn't forget favors and violate justice." Li Yunmu was laughing in his heart. The woman was clearly trying to use him to get out of an embarrassing situation. She was afraid that he would encounter danger? This was simply ridiculous. Underworld Serpent only thought of their own benefit. When did they ever show consideration for others? Chapter 683, Ghostly Ruins. Li Yunmu didn't hesitate and immediately went through the spatial door, which instantly delivered him to a strange space. When Missen saw him go, she was still extremely hesitant about whether they should follow him or not. Lai Feng, who was by her side, asked, "Missen, how about we let him go first and investigate while we stay here for the time being instead of moving about randomly? We don't have a good understanding of the Eastern Domain, so who knows what we will encounter after we go through that door." Missen hesitated for a while more while thinking of Li Yunmu's words. She hardened her heart then and said, "It doesn't matter. Even if we die, we die. In any case, the first ones dying won't be us." After Missen finished talking, she went through the spatial door. Inside the door, the space was distorted. Her body became unstable and began to sway because she couldn't control it. She closed her eyes, trying to move the strength in her body. However, it was as if she couldn't use any of her strength in that space. Pop! Missen was ruthlessly thrown to the ground. She massaged her body and suddenly felt something soft underneath. How could the ground here be the same as when we arrived at the Eastern Domain? It's so soft. Li Yunmu rolled his eyes at her and said, "I want to ask whether you have taken any drugs? Falling down on me twice." When Missen heard Li Yunmu's voice, she immediately jumped up in fright. When she looked around where she had been suddenly transferred, she saw that they were in a ruins. What exactly had happened there? Why was everything in ruins? She could not guess what would happen next in the ghostly world. Missen subconsciously pulled at Li Yunmu's clothes and, with her body trembling, she asked, "Where exactly are we? What is this place?" Underworld Serpent's people surprisingly didn't follow Missen into the ghostly world. They had refused to follow her orders and chose to act on their own. Those cowards of Underworld Serpent didn't follow? They left you alone. Li Yunmu's words caused Miss Anne's face to turn red. Underworld Serpent's people were extremely unreliable. After hearing her commands, they surprisingly chose to act on their own initiative and refused to face reality. Missen was furious after understanding it. Li Yunmu didn't continue to tease her. He stood up from the ground and carefully surveyed their surroundings. They were in a sealed ghostly world. Everything was in ruins and there were some remnant drops of water still present in space. They should have come from a vast body of water drying up. Upon seeing it, Li Yunmu couldn't help but think of the Eastern Domain he had seen recently. It was filled with thriving vegetation, so how could anyone tell that this place was part of it? Li Yunmu indifferently asked, "Do you want to go with me? If you don't want to follow me, then you can return for the time being." Missen opened her eyes wide and pulled at Li Yunmu's clothes. "You want to get rid of me? Don't even think about it. God knows where exactly is this place. Besides, what concerns those people of Underworld Serpent, I have seen their true colors. They surprisingly dared to abandon this miss by herself. Those guys, don't let me see them again. I will definitely beat them up if I do. Then let's go look for an exit from this place. Perhaps after we go out, we might truly enter the ancient lands. In my opinion, this is only the beginning of the Eastern Domain." Missen followed behind Li Yunmu, and they gradually proceeded forward. Soon, they saw countless ghost-like figures in front of them. They had the faintly discernible silhouettes of women. "Who are they?" Missen asked with a frown. Li Yunmu lifted his head and looked at the figures before them. After some careful thought, he said, "They should be the so-called phantoms." "What do you mean?" "This should be a scene from before this place turned into ruins. We are seeing phantoms from years long gone by." After hearing Li Yunmu's words, Missen took a deep breath. Is this really part of the Eastern Domain where the vast ocean has dried up? Should be. We must check it out. Li Yunmu moved forward cautiously. At that moment, the system inside his body gave him a warning. Some unknown organism is up ahead. You two must be careful. Woo wa. Missin frowned once she heard the noise. The next moment, a group of black zombies closed in on them in large numbers. The divine cyan blade appeared in Li Yunmu's hand. It flickered when he confronted the many zombies who turned into dust upon contact. Miss Anne's eyes went wide. Li Yunmu seemed to have become even more formidable compared to the first time when she had seen him. If he got a bit more time to mature, then Underworld Serpent would probably not even enter his eyes. He had defeated the Eight as well as the Heavenly Gods' Council, so it was obvious that his strength was out of the ordinary. If she had truly made an enemy out of such a person, that would have been absolutely foolish. However, as a woman, she felt extremely safe when hiding behind a brave and powerful man. Regardless of how terrifying a monster they encountered in the future, she wouldn't be afraid. As they continued to explore the ruins, Li Yunmu used Insect's Step. While carrying Missin, he leaped up and down the crumbled structures. From time to time, they encountered frightful beasts. They were half beast and half human and extremely sharp fangs. They also seemed to have gone half crazy. But those beasts were nothing compared to the gods, after all, they were only livestock. Under Li Yunmu's hand, they were only bags of experience points. Missin also joined him in fighting the frightful beasts. She lost her timidness from when she had just entered the ghostly world and showed her skills. Possibly because of encountering the frightful beasts along the way, she was quite embarrassed to let Li Yunmu do all the work. When they reached the exit, they saw something which they hadn't expected. A vast body of water covered their entire field of vision, and guarding it was a huge monster. Its body wasn't any smaller than that of a giant, and it appeared to be a fish. Chapter 684, Darknorth Fish. This is a Darknorth fish. Astonishment appeared in Li Yunmu's eyes. He hadn't expected that he would encounter such a legendary fish in the eastern domain. Its body was enormous, like a gigantic castle. Just in terms of size, Li Yunmu was already half lost, and Missin had never seen such a plump fish either. Her eyes were full of shock. Li Yunmu took a deep breath and said, "It seems like we have to defeat this monster. Only then will we be able to leave this ghostly world." But we didn't discover anything in the ghostly world. How could there be such a large fish here? Why the hell are you asking me? I also don't understand it. But I am certain that the spatial door in front us is definitely the true entrance to the eastern domain's ancient lands. Are you certain? Missin asked, half doubting and half believing him. But it was useless to say anything. Her ungrateful subordinates of Underworld Serpent had abandoned her, so she had turned into a true lone commander. Whether she died or lived would be determined by her fate. She didn't even know whether the man in front of her was reliable or not, so it would be great if he could at least get her to a safe place. As long as she could get to one, no one there would know that she was actually the leader of Underworld Serpent. Not only that, she could even begin a new life. Although she had been like a fish in the water in the Western world, things had went sour for her there. That was why when she reached the Eastern Domain, she had to seize all opportunities to keep herself alive. The most important thing for her at that moment wasn't to become an extraordinary person but to remain alive. If she could survive in the Eastern Domain, that would be a miracle. But the fish they had encountered at that moment was too terrifying. How could they even fight it? Li Yunmu wasn't hesitant like her, and the divine cyan blade was in his hand. If the fish launched an attack, he would definitely fight back. Missin knew that the Darknorth fish wouldn't be easy to deal with, and Li Yunmu was like a hot-headed youth who was courting his death. She was completely out of luck. Even though the fish was enormous, it was also extremely flexible. It instantly charged at Li Yunmu and Missin. But what Missin couldn't understand was why the fish chose to attack only her and didn't show any intention of attacking Li Yunmu. It was like meeting a ghost. When Li Yunmu saw that the target of the fish was Missin, he couldn't help but laugh. Seems like this guy can distinguish between right and wrong. It knows that you are a villain and I am a good person, and it would never hurt good people. Missen became even more anxious upon hearing Li Yunmu's words. The fish didn't give her any face, so she could only use her full strength. In any case, she was also a half-step god. How could she be casually bullied by a fish? With her eyes full of fury, she loudly shouted and gathered dark energy in her hands. They transformed into two black blades, and she continuously waved them in the water as if painting a beautiful picture. The battle between the woman and the fish was extremely picturesque, and for a moment, Li Yunmu was a bit stunned. Missen was extremely beautiful while fighting. It was unlike when she kept scheming and wearing a mask, which disgusted people. The Darknorth fish was an ancient devil beast whose strength was only below that of gods and almost equivalent to half-god humans. Therefore, Missen was in a stalemate while fighting against it and found it difficult to extricate herself. The system's voice echoed in Li Yunmu's mind. This fish is known as Kun, the king of Darknorth fish, and is an ancient devil beast. I fear that this girl won't be its opponent. Li Yunmu smiled calmly. She should taste a little bit of suffering. I want to let her know that this world isn't as simple as she thinks, so that she will conduct herself with integrity and restraint in the future instead of acting spoiled. You are a good person, the system said calmly. Li Yunmu collected his divine cyan blade and said with a smile, "This woman was the leader of Underworld Serpent, and we have no idea what sort of schemes she had prepared before coming to us. Now if she owes me a favor, what won't she share in the future? Even more two-faced than me? Who did you learn this from?" Li Yunmu sneered at the system. "Who else? As your host for a long time, don't you think that I would learn some of your tricks? Aren't you underestimating me too much?" The system couldn't help but shake its head and sigh. "You are indeed very cunning. But you should take it a little easy. The woman cannot hold for much longer." When Li Yunmu saw Kun amusing itself with Missen, a hint of ruthlessness entered his eyes. Although Missen was quite skilled, she was facing an ancient devil beast. Apart from god-level powerhouses, others could only leave injured or dead after fighting it. Pop! While trying to launch a kick, Missen collided with Kun. Her body was instantly thrown to the ground, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes. He had already discovered Kun's weakness by watching their fight. Missen was extremely young, and she couldn't compare to seasoned veterans. Although she had already reached half-god level, Li Yunmu guessed that she had relied on seizing opportunities to push herself to that far. With one glance, he could tell that her foundation was unstable. Li Yunmu lent his arm to support Missen, then softly said, "You should rest carefully on the side. I will get rid of it." Missen didn't realize that under the new circumstances, she had turned from an enemy into a friend for Li Yunmu. Before she wouldn't have even dared to think about it. But at that moment, she surprisingly thought of Li Yunmu as her friend. Moreover, since he was staking his life for her, could it be that he cared about her? Missen was extremely confident in her charm. In her heart, there wasn't a man alive who could escape her charm, and she could conquer anyone by relying on it. Otherwise, she would have never been able to establish Underworld Serpent. But Underworld Serpent had actually broken her heart. Just when Missen sighed, Li Yunmu began to fight against Kun. Kun possessed a collision force of 5,000 oxen, which was extremely strainful for Missen. But what left her extremely astonished was that Li Yunmu simply pressed the divine cyan blade against Kun's nose, and it stopped in place. The fish struggled against it, but to no avail. Chapter 685, The Kun. Missen was completely taken aback. Wasn't that cheating? How could he simply subdue that fish? She couldn't believe her eyes, but it only reinforced her understanding of just how formidable was Li Yunmu's strength. When he had defeated Mahoraga of the Eight, she was already gobsmacked. Right then, he had also dealt with the ancient devil beast whom she couldn't do anything about. How exactly had he accomplished that? Was he truly just a half-step god? Missen shook her head. He only appeared to be a half-god on the surface, but in reality he had probably already reached ancient god level. If he made another breakthrough, he might even come to possess master god level strength. The 5 master gods in the origin world hadn't awakened yet, so the conflicts between different powers also didn't become excessively vicious. But once the 5 master gods joined the battles, the origin world would truly sink into the chaos of war. When that thought entered her mind, Miss.N felt that Eastern Domain's ancient lands would be comparatively safer. The western part of the world had 4 masters, and there was a good chance they would battle each other, causing frequent wars. A small organization like Underworld Serpent would be like an ant in the eyes of those gods. But the Eastern Domain was more stable. After all, the feeling of mysteriousness in that region caused all the Western gods to stay away. Only one master god ruled over it, so there wouldn't be any disputes between gods, making it relatively safer. The only cause of concern for Miss.N was how she would survive until she reached the Eastern region's ancient lands. Li Yunmu's divine cyan blade moved slightly and chopped off the Kun's fin. After losing it, the Kun lost all sense of direction like a rudderless boat. The Kun who had lost sense of direction began to flee everywhere like a headless fly, and it collided with everything in its path. The fins were the weak point which Li Yunmu had discovered. After the Kun lost one, it became blind. In such a state, the Kun wasn't the least bit of a threat to Li Yunmu. As long as he struck it again, the Kun would fall apart in 2 halves and instantly dissipate. However, the directionless Kun suddenly began to advance towards Miss.N once more. It staked its whole life on that blow. As soon as he saw Kun flying toward Miss.N, Li Yunmu immediately shouted a warning for her. Careful! Before his words could even reach her, he leapt toward her, which gave a fright to Miss.N. Until just a moment ago, she had been lost in thought. When she discovered that Li Yunmu had leapt in front of her, her heartbeat sped up instantly. What was going on? Why did her heartbeat suddenly become so fast? Could it be because of that man? Miss.N didn't dare to imagine what it could mean and promptly stabilized her breathing. As it happened, Li Yunmu lifted her in his arms and dodged to the side. How can you be so careless? Miss.N felt quite wronged after being berated by Li Yunmu. Clearly, everything had happened because he had defeated the Kun in one strike, which had pushed it to rushing against her. A low howl echoed in the water, and the Kun pounced toward them once more. The formidable might with which it bashed against the reefs under the water was enough to shatter all of them. If the attack had landed on Miss.N just a moment ago, she might have truly died. Li Yunmu took a deep breath and loudly shouted while holding the divine cyan blade in his hand, "Violent blade, heavy leap, strike!" Although his jump wasn't as high because of the water, his long blade relied on momentum to instantly slice the Kun into 2. The Kun's body exploded, which created concentric waves in the water which rippled continuously. A few minutes after the Kun disappeared, a bird flew out of the water as if it had just undergone nirvanic rebirth and was returning to the sky. It flew to a height of 90,000 kilometers. This is Peng. The Kun had suddenly transformed into a Peng. Not only was Miss.N completely astonished, but even Li Yunmu, who had just slain the Kun, was amazed. The fish of Darknorth was known as Kun Peng. So it wasn't just a legend? Could it be that they were in the Darknorth region of the Eastern Domain? After passing through it, hopefully they would get closer to ancient lands. When he thought of it, Li Yunmu calmed down. First, he needed to settle down and see where they would be delivered. Behind the Peng, there was a gate which resembled the rotating spatial vortex, which was probably the exit. Li Yunmu tried a few times to get past the Peng and reach the exit, but he was repeatedly blocked by the bird. Shoo! The Peng issued a loud cry, as if mourning its predecessor Kun. It also displayed great hostility toward Li Yunmu. That hostility was very intense, and the waves suddenly formed an enormous whirlpool. The Peng constantly fluttered its wings, seemingly intent on drawing its enemy into the whirlpool. The Peng was different from the Kun, and its strength was far superior. Not only did it possess wings, it could even shoot whirlpools from its mouth, which could instantly devour everything. There was no need to mention Li Yunmu and Misan when the entire ghostly world might be swallowed by the peng. Its terrifying power was simply unimaginable for Misan. She subconsciously tried to run, but the whirlpool didn't give her the opportunity to escape. Seeing this, she couldn't help but cry out in fear. Li Yunmu was calm in comparison and dragged her to his side. "Don't be afraid with me here. This guy is more formidable compared to the Kun, so it should be another ancient devil beast." Misan gritted her teeth and said, You quickly think of something. I really don't want to die." While Misan pulling at him, Li Yunmu thought about how to solve their problem. But the system inside him was not saying anything, as if it had been infected by the water and had broken down. "Say something. You possess the great devouring technique, so why are you still asking for me to settle it?" The half-dead system finally replied, which brought relief to Li Yunmu. Fortunately, his toy wasn't broken. If it had been broken down, he had no idea what he would need to do. Li Yunmu took a deep breath and absorbed the power of the whirlpool. Beside him, Misan suddenly felt her body become lighter until it was no longer affected by the power of the whirlpool. After Li Yunmu absorbed it, he suddenly used its power toward the peng. Chapter 686, Divine Beast. The formidable might of the attack instantly swallowed the peng. How did being swallowed by one's own power felt like? Shoo! The peng constantly issued miserable shrieks. Being attacked by one's own power was truly miserable, and one of its wings was destroyed by the power of the whirlpool. The peng shuddered slightly. Upon seeing it suddenly lose combat strength, Li Yunmu chose to attack. He couldn't allow the peng to recover at any cost. Li Yunmu firmly held his divine cyan blade and used violent blade heavenly leap chop to instantly destroy the bird's other wing. The peng who had lost both its wings also lost its ability to fly. Rising to the heavens became only a dream for it. Shoo! The bird kept shrieking constantly until Li Yunmu sliced off its head. The spatial whirlpool behind it instantly stopped after that. When Misan saw Li Yunmu kill another ancient devil beast, she was instantly stupefied. The exit was activated though, and she became extremely happy. She hadn't expected that Li Yunmu, by himself, was more formidable than her entire underworld serpent. Compared to her going wild with joy, Li Yunmu only looked at her expressionlessly. Miss Anne's scalp went numb upon noticing Li Yunmu's stare, and she couldn't help but ask with a frown, "Why do you always keep staring at me like that? If you have something to say, then say it. Don't keep staring at me. It is weird. I couldn't find the opportunity to ask you while we were in the western region, so what exactly was your underworld serpent's plan? Why did you keep trying to persuade me again and again to collaborate with you? What was your aim?" Misan waved her hand. "Why do you still care about this matter? Underworld serpent had already ceased to exist, so why are you asking about it?" Li Yunmu smiled calmly at her. "I was somewhat curious and nothing more. If your plan jeopardized my interests, I would naturally have some interest in it." Misan looked at Li Yunmu's cold gaze. It seemed like if she didn't speak the truth, it was very possible that he would leave her there by herself, trapped for all eternity. She waved her hand a couple more times. "Fine, fine. We weren't as bad as you think, and we didn't intend to get involved in the power struggle. Our goal was survival. Previously Zeus had issued a clear command against Underworld Serpent, intending to trap and annihilate us. We had no other choice than to request help from the Eight. We tried to find you to collaborate because you had defeated the Heavenly Gods' Council. If they planned to do to you what they thought to do to us, don't tell me you wouldn't resist." Li Yunmu thought about it. Miss Anne's reasons indeed made sense, but he was still suspicious about one point. Why exactly did she want to obtain the secret genetic code? Then why did you want the secret genetic code? Do you know its secret? Miss Anne repeatedly shook her head. "I don't know its secret nor that you possessed it. I only heard that after Zeus received the news that the secret genetic code had been lost, he became very worried. After I received this information, I tried to find the secret genetic code to negotiate with Zeus. Your underworld serpent truly possessed great courage. What else could we do? We were living on the edge of a blade, so how else could we have survived in the origin world for so long? Misen snorted. I am a woman and very easy to bully. Li Yunmu nodded. Your reply can be considered to have satisfied me. But regretfully, the secret genetic code is already in my body, so your wish to obtain it is impossible. Misen waved her hand. Doesn't matter. I no longer care about it. Look, I have come to the eastern domain, so Zeus shouldn't be able to capture me, right? Also, the 8 whom I have previously offended also shouldn't be able to get a hold of me here. Instead, I can live a little more leisurely here. With Misen being so optimistic, Li Yunmu also didn't continue thinking about it and went through the exit with her. But what they never expected was that after they passed through the gate, the other side would be completely different from their imagination. They had ended up in a field of flowers, and there was a transparent path like an illusion going through it. The region where they landed appeared to be extremely mysterious. Not far from them was a towering mountain range. A bright moon hung above it. Li Yunmu lifted his head in slight astonishment. Even he didn't know where exactly they had arrived. Have we already reached ancient lands? Misen asked while blinking her big eyes. The place truly resembled the legendary ancient lands, but Li Yunmu wasn't sure about it. After all, the eastern domain was simply too mysterious, unlike the western region which Misen knew like the back of her hand. In the eastern domain, she was like a blind person who couldn't find the path. Li Yunmu knitted his brows when a voice suddenly spoke in his ears as if summoning him. Old friend, you have finally come to see me. Old friend, why did you come to find me only now? Upon hearing the strange voice, Li Yunmu covered his ears with his hands, but these voices still didn't stop. Don't try to stop it. It's useless. It should be the summons of a divine beast in the vicinity. Divine beast? According to the system's words, it was the highest ranked beast in the eastern domain. They could communicate with humans and possessed boundless flux energy. Some of the divine beasts even possessed strength surpassing divine grade. For example, the most mysterious dragon race of the eastern domain didn't exist in the western region. Since he was with the summons of a divine beast, Li Yunmu decided to follow the voice and check it out. If he offended the divine beast, he would have a truly miserable fate. When Misen saw Li Yunmu advancing toward the mountain range, she swiftly stopped him. What are you trying to do? We still don't know what region this, and you moving around carelessly is just courting death. Li Yunmu suddenly smiled, saying, when did Misen from the Grand Underworld Serpent begin to care about me? His words were filled with ridicule and Misen wasn't an idiot, so why wouldn't she realize it? She rolled her eyes and muttered, who cares about you? I just don't want you to die. After all, you did save me, which could be considered as a favor. Since it doesn't concern you, then all right. Stay here for the time being. I want to check something out. If you're afraid, you don't need to follow me, he said indifferently. Chapter 687, Fight with a Dragon. Misen became extremely anxious when she saw Li Yunmu's departing figure. Hey! You cannot abandon me here. What if I encounter another ancient devil beast? I won't be able to deal with it. Hey, you can't go. Li Yunmu, however, kept walking toward the mountain range without any hesitation. Misen, who was extremely fearful of the eastern domain, immediately went after him. Although she instinctively resisted acting recklessly and walking down a random path, who had asked Li Yunmu to save her life. It was impossible for her to keep staring blankly while he went on the path of his demise. Li Yunmu reached a cliff, and suddenly a shocking wave rose from the sea underneath it. A black dragon rose from the water. Misen was frightened by the black dragon to the point her body went soft. If it was above the ancient devil beasts, then based on the terrifying might it emitted, Misen knew she wouldn't be its opponent. "Mortal, how dare you trespass in this region?" The dragon's voice was as majestic as a huge bell. If anyone else had seen the dragon reveal its might, they would have been frightened stiff long ago. But Li Yunmu wasn't an ordinary person. He wasn't even afraid of gods, so why would he be afraid of a dragon? "I heard a voice summoning me here, thus I came here." The dragon was somewhat amazed and looked the mortal up and down. Suddenly it sniffed a familiar scent from Li Yunmu and instantly stretched its neck forward. With mountains roaring and seas howling, Li Yunmu remained expressionless even when the dragon approached him with its formidable might. "Mortal, you are the first person to remain so calm in front of me. No ordinary person would dare to resist the pressure emitted from my body." The dragon's voice was extremely majestic, and Miss Anne's body had gone soft on the ground because of its pressure. However, Li Yunmu's face still didn't show any expression. The dragon found it quite unusual. Li Yunmu looked into the black dragon's eyes with complete calm and said, "I don't know why, but seeing a dragon is like seeing an old friend. I don't feel any nervousness." A hint of surprise appeared in the dragon's eyes, which was extremely difficult to detect. With a voice as resounding as a huge bell, he asked, "Mortal, how are you related to Spirit Wood?" Li Yunmu turned silent. In his mind, a figure of a person called Spirit Wood flashed. In the ghostly world, Misen had seen the portrait of a person called Spirit Wood Man. He shook his head and said, "I don't know what you mean, but getting to meet you was fate." Dragon mulled over his words for a moment, then said, "Whether you are an enemy or a friend, a test will confirm it." Li Yunmu was slightly startled. He didn't know what exactly the dragon had meant. Did it want to test his strength? At that moment, he possessed strength close to ancient god level. If he truly fought against the dragon, it was highly possible that he would end up on the winning side. However, the dragon suddenly roared into the horizon and flew out of the sea, sending the vegetation in the surroundings flying away. After turning over the heaven and earth as well as flying in the sky for a while, it suddenly spew out a stream of air. Azure Ocean Dragon Roar. That stream of air caused the mountain range to disappear. Miss Anne's body was almost swept up, and she shrieked loudly. If it were not for Li Yunmu acting quickly and pulling her hand, she would have been blown away, and they would have been separated. But the dragon's strength caused Li Yunmu's face to slowly turn unsightly. The dragon's power was quite formidable. Many ancient gods wouldn't be as tyrannical as it. The dragon's roar showed that its strength couldn't be underestimated. Li Yunmu instantly became on guard against the dragon in his heart. The system chose to speak up then. "This dragon isn't easy to deal with, so you have to be careful." Li Yunmu nodded and said, "I know. But I could only battle with him to confirm his identity. It won't really hurt me since it had been constantly calling me his friend. Apparently, it's the same as your relationship with Odin. I suggest that you don't use the Great Devouring technique and just injure the opponent lightly." Li Yunmu had also intended to do this so the dragon would see a different side of him. Li Yunmu placed Misen on the side, then his figure flickered when he charged toward the dragon. He lowered the divine cyan blade in his hand and madly struck at the enormous dragon. Li Yunmu's trick was quite insignificant in the dragon's eyes. It was accustomed to battling humans, so it was used to humanity's combat style since a long time ago. The afterimage of Li Yunmu's attack couldn't injure the dragon's body. The dragon moved its tail and instantly swatted Li Yunmu away. If it were not for him being ready for it, he would have been sent flying. Li Yunmu's body suddenly changed into a metal suit with an impenetrable defense. The continuous roars of the dragon were unable to shake his body in the slightest. The dragon's eyes filled with astonishment. The mortal's body had been covered by metal armor, and it seemed to be completely invulnerable. Its dragon roar tsunami had also been unable to influence Li Yunmu. With the metal armor covering his body, regardless of how much the dragon attacked, Li Yunmu was able to endure it. The dragon couldn't help but be slightly shaken. "Your metal armor is quite formidable, hey?" Li Yunmu laughed slightly. "Dragon, you let me win. Once it heard his words, the dragon stopped and indifferently said, you being able to fight against me with a mortal body to this stage already isn't ordinary. But I feel that the sense of familiarity coming from you has become even stronger. Have we met in the past? Li Yunmu didn't dare to be certain, but the feeling of familiarity couldn't be wrong. He shook his head however. Perhaps we have met, but that doesn't matter. We can be considered to be connected by fate. Seeing an old friend, I have only one thing to ask, how can one reach the ancient lands? The dragon was silent for a while before saying, I have been punished by Fu Xi for several thousand years and have been repenting in this Zhuzhu region. I have never gone out of sea before today and I don't know about the situation in Kyushu. But since you are related to me, I won't mind sending you off to a place from which you can reach ancient lands. Chapter 688, Dragon Silk Palace. But this guilty person cannot deliver you far. You will have to travel the rest of the way by yourselves, the dragon said in a muffled voice. Li Yunmu promptly cupped his hands to pay his respect. Thank you for your grace. Someday, I will definitely repay this favor. The dragon rolled in the sea, and the heaven and earth changed color again. Get on my body. Li Yunmu pulled Misun, who was still frightened and undecided, onto the dragon's horn. The dragon then escorted them to their destination. Before dropping them, it indifferently said, here lies the boundary which this guilty one cannot cross. You two continue forward and perhaps you will be able to find the ancient lands which you have been looking for. Before its words could fade and Li Yunmu could say his thanks, the dragon lowered itself into the water and disappeared from sight. Misun, who had been hiding behind Li Yunmu throughout their journey, looked at him with some lingering fear. It went away. Li Yunmu nodded. Yes, it left. What a pity. We encountered a divine beast with great difficulty, but it had to leave. What are you saying? It was a divine beast. Divine beasts were on a higher level than ancient devil beasts. Their strength even surpassed that of gods. After hearing Li Yunmu's words, Misun couldn't help but swallow hard. When she had battled against an ancient devil beast with her half-step god-level strength, she still couldn't gain an upper hand. If she had encountered a divine beast, then wouldn't she be completely crushed? Yet Li Yunmu had actually battled the dragon just a moment ago without using his full strength, and it had ended in a tie. From this, it could be clearly seen that the divine beast's strength was above that of gods but below that of ancient gods. Li Yunmu wasn't concerned about the strength of the dragon like Misun. He was anxious to reach ancient lands and obtain the secret ancient method. Each passing second and minute was disadvantageous for his world. It needed Li Yunmu to rescue it. He could be considered its only hope. If he couldn't find the secret ancient method, his Earth wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being merged. The day when the projection planes would merge is coming closer and closer. The stars are completely disordered, and I am no longer able to calculate how much time we have. If you continue to drag your feet, I fear your world won't survive its crisis. The system's words caused Li Yunmu to become even more anxious. If he couldn't find the ancient secret method, he would be unable to protect everything he treasured. He had to quickly reach the ancient lands and find the ancient secret method. Li Yunmu's hurried steps didn't escape Miss Anne's eyes, and she became suspicious. Why are you so anxious? While they were speaking, a teleport halo appeared in front of them. Li Yunmu advanced toward it without any hesitation. Miss Anne immediately followed after him. By then, she was like a conjoined twin. Where Li Yunmu went, she would definitely follow. She regarded Li Yunmu as a protective umbrella in the eastern domain. After that, she held onto Li Yunmu while he swam through the currents. As time passed, it became increasingly more difficult for them to breathe underwater. The system then made some urgent arrangements in Li Yunmu's place and used 2,000 space elements to exchange for 2 airdrops. One of them was for Miss Anne. Once she received it, she felt that she was again living on the dry land. There wasn't the slightest bit of difference. Very good. We can surprisingly move under the water now. Li Yunmu, however, didn't care about Missen and instead focused his gaze on the palace not far from them. Where is this? Missen was slightly startled, and her heart clenched. Wow! It's so pretty. Seems like a palace. Could it be the legendary Atlantis? Li Yunmu shook his head. The structure before him resembled ancient Chinese buildings, so how could it be related to a Western region's city? It was probably the palace of the Dragon King. Li Yunmu and Missen advanced toward the palace step by step. Above the entrance, there was a board which clearly stated, Dragon Silk Palace. Li Yunmu and Missen cautiously entered inside. The moment they did so, a crab and a lobster obstructed their path. Who are you? This is the Dragon Silk Palace. Are you two mortals courting death? Missen was very furious. She and Li Yunmu could be considered as half-step gods. How come were they repeatedly called mortals then? Didn't she have any face? Could it be that she wasn't formidable? I am sorry, caretakers. We were directed here by a friend and we just wanted to ask for directions, Li Yunmu said indifferently. Ask for directions? You mortals can easily move under the water, so you definitely aren't up to anything good. Arrest them on my order. Report to the Dragon Lady. Li Yunmu and Missen were immediately surrounded by shrimp soldiers, crab generals, jellyfish as well as other marine organisms. All of them were eyeing them covetously. It is truly a misunderstanding. We have truly come to ask for directions. Let them come in, a woman's tender voice echoed, and the shrimp soldiers and crab generals immediately became respectful. Li Yunmu and Missen were led in front of a woman who had spoken. She looked extremely pretty with her fair face with two red cheeks. Her eyes were full of youth and inexperience, but her clothes gave her a mature charm. She blinked her large eyes and said while looking at Li Yunmu, I am Dragon Lady, Beautiful Silk, the master of this Dragon Silk Palace. What directions do you seek? Li Yunmu took a step forward and promptly explained himself. Hello, Dragon Lady, it's like this. We were sent to these waters by Elder Brother Dragon and incidentally entered the Dragon Silk Palace. If this alarmed you, then I will apologize to you. We are hurrying towards ancient lands and request your help with that. Beautiful Silk twirled her hair with her finger and said, I see that you two have relied upon airdrops to walk through water. If you want to reach the ancient lands by yourself, then I am afraid to say that it would take at least a month. But if you ride on our palace's waiver boat, you could reach them in less than 3 days. Li Yunmu became somewhat excited. The faster they could reach ancient lands, the better it would be for him. That way, he would be able to find the ancient secret method faster and return to his Earth to save it before it was too late. P.S. Underworld Serpent was indeed a second-tier power. To be accurate, it was at the top of second-rate powers. It was a step away from becoming a first-rate power despite having a huge foundation in its members. It surpassed ordinary first-rate powers in that regard, but because of not fulfilling a certain criteria, it was still second-rate and couldn't take the final step. Chapter 689, The Condition. Then I would have to trouble Madam Dragon Lady. Li Yunmu said, expressing his gratitude. Who knew that the Dragon Lady would then speak up with an anxious expression? But if you want our Dragon Silk Palace to create a waiver boat for you, you two mortals will have to pay a price for it. I knew that it wouldn't be that simple. In this world, only fools would help you without asking for anything in return, Missen said with a snort. As the leader of Underworld Serpent, she had become proficient in such matters long ago. She could see that the Dragon Lady Beautiful Silk wasn't that easy. They would definitely need to pay some price, so the woman's words weren't out of her expectations. Li Yunmu hadn't expected that the Dragon Lady, who seemed to be extremely kind, would have a scheming heart. He had truly miscalculated. After some thought, however, he decided to first see the condition and then make his decision. The Dragon Lady sighed. This woman requires a man, someone as smooth-skinned and tender as you. Aware of the hidden hostility in beautiful Silk's eyes, Li Yunmu went cold, and his whole body was broke out in goosebumps. What exactly was the dragon lady trying to get from him? While Li Yunmu's heart filled with fear, dragon lady's behavior changed from earnest to flirtatious. Mortal, don't be nervous. The price you need to pay is very simple. I need you to give me a child who will become the heir of the Dragon Silk Palace. In the past hundreds of thousands of years, no strong men have come here. You are the first to show up, so it seems that it is your fate, and mine too. If you are willing to help me, I will use all I have to make a waiver boat for you which will help you cross the sea. If you aren't willing, then don't blame this dragon lady for not helping you. Without the waiver boat, you will need at least a month to reach the ancient lands. If you lose the airdrop, you will even be in mortal danger. The dragon lady had promised so much, so how could Li Yunmu refuse? For the ancient secret method, he was ready to stake his all. But surprisingly in the beginning, he only needed to sacrifice his body. The master of the Dragon Silk Palace was quite exotic and still needed a son. This simply left Li Yunmu dumbfounded. Everyone said that the eastern domain was conservative, but the first person he encountered was an extremely open-minded dragon lady. Seeing Li Yunmu still hesitating, she coldly snorted. Since you two aren't willing to satisfy my conditions, I request you to leave. Misan sneered at her. Request us to leave? How could you ask someone to give birth to your child and then give it up to you? Li Yunmu took a step forward then. Quell your anger, dragon lady. I agree, this matter isn't anything difficult for me. But I am extremely anxious to hasten on my journey and hope that you won't make me stay here for long. I also hope that you will help me reach my destination. Seeing Li Yunmu respectfully accept the dragon lady's request, Misan immediately pointed at his nose and began to curse him. You smelly man, how could you be so shameless? You will just give birth to anyone's child if they ask you? You truly don't have no shame. Li Yunmu shrugged his shoulders. Don't tell me that you intend to drift in the sea for a month. Misan was completely dumbstruck and unable to reply to Li Yunmu's words. Who knew how long would the airdrops last? If they lost them, they wouldn't be able to survive in the sea for long. Misan couldn't say anything when she thought of that. She just coldly snorted and muttered to herself, in any case, whose child you want to give birth to is your own matter. When beautiful Silk saw that Li Yunmu agreed, she instantly began to grin from ear to ear and went to his side. She carefully observed his body and caressed his chest from time to time without any shyness on her face. Li Yunmu couldn't help but mutter inwardly, can this dragon lady be an old lady? How can she look at a man like she is looking at a commodity? It makes me feel quite uncomfortable. When Misan saw the dragon lady testing Li Yunmu's body, goosebumps rose all over her body and she thought, this Li Yunmu has a weak moral character. He's even attracted to such a woman. When the time comes, you won't find anywhere to go even if you cry. Miss Anne's thinking was still too naive. Li Yunmu was completely clear about the fact that it was going to be a business transaction so both of them can get what they want. After he obtained the waiver boat, they would probably never meet again in the future. Madam Dragon Lady, how many days will be required to create this waiver boat? He asked. With her body almost falling upon him, beautiful Silk replied with a smile, don't be anxious, my husband and master. During the next 2 days, we will enjoy the pleasures of intimacy that a couple shares. Once they're over, I guarantee that I will send you out on a waiver boat. Upon hearing beautiful Silk's promise, Li Yunmu nodded in agreement. After that, she pushed him into the inner room, and the people of Dragon Silk Palace tightly shut the door before scattering. Misan was arranged to stay in another room of Dragon Silk Palace. After being led there, Misan was extremely angry inside. She had followed Li Yunmu yet somehow turned into an unwanted guest. He had actually chosen to sell his body just to reach the ancient lands a little bit faster. Beast! Shameless! Scoundrel! Misan subconsciously began to pour down a torrent of curses on Li Yunmu. Yet she soon felt that cursing was completely opposite to her character. Her face turned red at that, and she stopped cursing. Could it be that she had grown fond of that youngster? But she was unsuccessful in seducing him. It was clear that he wasn't interested in her, so when had she begun to care about him? Moreover, why was she feeling so much anger at the thought of the dragon lady giving birth to his son? With such thoughts, Misan promptly went to bed to force herself to sleep. She couldn't let her think about him anymore. But after she lay down in bed, it became even more difficult for her to control her mind. When she thought of how Li Yunmu and Dragon Lady Beautiful Silk were enjoying the carnal pleasures, she angrily stood up. This won't do. This miss will definitely stop them, otherwise, this miss won't be able to swallow her food. However, when she tried to go out, she was stopped by the marine soldiers. Madam Dragon Lady has commanded that no one is allowed to leave their room. Hello, you are restricting this miss freedom. Why can't this miss go out? This miss isn't your slave. Chapter 690, Running Amok in the Dragon Silk Palace. This is the order of our Dragon Lady. If you aren't satisfied, then talk to the Dragon Lady. We can't let you go out. Misan looked at the shrimp soldiers and crab generals acting so rampant and became flustered. Without caring for the difference in strength, she took the initiative to attack. The soldiers had never thought that Misan would surprisingly attack them and were instantly blown away by her. Humph, this Miss Freedom isn't your concern. In the end, the crab soldiers were just marine animals and couldn't stand a blow from a half-god Misan. She quickened her steps and hurriedly advanced toward Dragon Silk Palace. The entryway to it was filled with guards. That Li Yunmu is just a scoundrel. With that thought, Misan became even more pissed. She didn't want the person she liked to degrade to such a level, so she would definitely stop the Dragon Lady. The guards in front of the Dragon Silk Palace were somewhat astonished. However, compared to the people guarding her residence, they were much more strict and numerous. If she forcibly tried to enter, they would certainly alert the Dragon Lady inside. Moreover, Misan didn't know how far the two of them had already reached. Maybe they had begun to make love long ago. But Misan felt like at least one screw was loose in her brain. She couldn't help but wish to spoil Dragon Lady's plan and wake up Li Yunmu. Li Yunmu, come out. Have you ever thought about the feelings of others? Come out here. In front of the Dragon Palace, Misan continuously hurled abuses. When the guards heard it, they all knitted their brows. Who is it? Who dares to make a racket outside our Dragon Silk Palace? Are you courting death? Many sea soldiers encircled Misan, and the guards, who had been ordered to keep her in her room, appeared in front of Dragon Silk Palace too. In a fluster, one of them said, "General, subordinate has failed in his duty and allowed this woman to run out. She is truly too cunning, and we have no way to stop her. No one is allowed to disturb Madam Dragon Lady's matters. All of you take her away." General Tortoise furiously said to the marine soldiers. After hearing the order, the marine soldiers instantly went to stop Misan. But she wasn't exactly an ordinary person, but an expert with the strength of a half-step god. If she really wanted to fight the marine soldiers, then none of them could be her opponents. Inside the Dragon Silk Palace, the beautiful Silk sat up after enjoying sexual intercourse. When she heard the clamor outside, she frowned and said, "Has something happened outside?" Li Yunmu quickly put on his clothes and indifferently said, "Just now, I think I heard the voice of my friend. She should have gotten in conflict with some of your people." Dragon Lady Beautiful Silk suddenly looked at Li Yunmu with an amorous gaze. "Is it possible that girl likes you? When I saw her for the first time, I felt that she looked at you with a strange gaze." Li Yunmu began to laugh, somewhat not daring to believe that someone was saying that the leader of Underworld Serpent, who had just recently wanted to kill him, now liked him. Unless trying to kill him could be regarded as liking him, Li Yunmu wouldn't be able to believe it. Beautiful Silk rearranged her clothes and said, I still don't know your name. Our son will be born in roughly a year. If you want to visit him in the future, I won't stop you. But henceforth, our son will become the master of Dragon Silk Palace. As you say, Dragon Lady. Beautiful Silk placed her hand on Li Yunmu's chest. At some point in time, a treasure pearl had appeared in her hand. She pushed it into Li Yunmu's hand. This treasure pearl can deliver you directly to Dragon Silk Palace. If you want to see your son, use it to come here. Beautiful Silk, who had been like a crazy beast on the bed, had turned extremely considerate afterwards, making Li Yunmu feel like the world had turned tender. He took the treasure pearl and kissed Beautiful Silk's forehead. Many thanks. Beautiful Silk smiled at him. But I hope that before the waiver boat is prepared, you will enjoy the remaining time with me. The hint was very clear, the Dragon Lady was clearly an insatiable woman. Li Yunmu bitterly smiled after hearing her words. He had to endure it for the waiver boat. But I still think I should see my friend first. If she continues being so noisy, I will lose face in front of your Dragon Silk Palace. Beautiful Silk covered her mouth and smiled. Yes. A girl in love can do anything, no matter how crazy it is. Li Yunmu sighed in his heart. It seemed like Beautiful Silk was only interested in his body and didn't like him much emotionally, otherwise, she would have been furious at Misan entering the Dragon Silk Palace. It was not the case, however. She was completely calm. The system's voice echoed in Li Yunmu's mind at that moment. All right. Youngster, I hadn't thought that you would become an expert in picking girls. That woman from Underworld Serpent had wanted to kill you earlier, and now she charged into the Dragon Silk Palace for you without caring for her life? If this Dragon Silk lady's temperament was even a little bad, that girl would already be dead. Li Yunmu naturally understood this point. However, the system was now saying that he was an expert at picking girls. Weren't these words a little exaggerated? From the start, he hadn't done anything. He had no idea why Misan had suddenly fallen for him. He was completely dumbfounded at that moment. When he walked out of the Dragon Silk Palace, Misan aggressively walked towards him and slapped him across his face without saying a word. You scoundrel! Li Yunmu was slightly startled. He hadn't expected Misan to suddenly slap him, and so heavily too. He subdued her, then brought her to a place where no one was present. But Misan still kept struggling, not being obedient. You release me. Right now. You scoundrel. Did you enjoy yourself in the Dragon Silk Palace? You are completely shameless. Have you cursed enough? If it were not for me pleading for leniency with the Dragon Silk Lady, you would be dead by now. Do you understand that? Do you care about your life? Do you still want to leave this Dragon Silk Palace alive? Or could it be that you want to be trapped in this ocean forever? Li Yunmu asked in a low voice.